I think we are all familiar with this. Islam celebrates diversity. I think that is one thing that we have to bear in mind bila kita bercakap tentang diversity. The Quran highlights the purpose of diversity. Allah says, "O mankind, we have created you male and female and appointed you races and tribes that you may know one another." Bukan untuk bermusuhan atau sebagainya, tetapi untuk mengenal satu sama lain supaya kita lebih mudah nak berkomunikasi, bergaul antara satu sama lain dan sebagainya. We know each other well. Surely the noblest among you in the sight of God is the most God-fearing of you. God is all-knowing, all-aware. Dan kita juga tahu the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, reiterated this in his final sermon. Right, this is my family, my extended family. Of course, this is me here. And this is my, well, I'm a Chile, if you call that Chile, Chinese Malay. Okay, this is my cousin Yusuf, who is a Chindian. This is his wife, who is a Malay. So his kids here are all what perhaps we can call Machindians, Malay, Chinese, Indian. And he's got a whole range of cousins from diverse ethnic background here. Here are his Indian cousins. This is another Chindian cousin here. This cousin here, Jeffrey, is also a Chindian but raised by a Malay mother because his father went on to marry a Malay, and he's now married to a Malay woman as well. So his children here are also Machindians. So are my kids. So very diverse, and it helps us in understanding each other, understanding the diverse cultures in Malaysia. The Webster's dictionary defines diversity as the inclusion of different types of people, such as people of different races or culture in a group or organization. But diversity doesn't just cover races and cultures. It's a lot more than that. And it says here the definition is a good starting point to consider when a company wants to change the culture of its workforce. But what it fails to encompass is that establishing diversity in an environment requires more than just inclusion, as we shall see afterwards. And it requires cultural respect and competence. What we call culture is not just culture in terms of race and ethnic groups, but culture in other forms and angles of humanity as well. Right. Now, this is what I wanted to emphasize. Diversity is not just in terms of race or even gender, but other things as well. For example, personality. Like, for example, we all know, those who are familiar with psychology, Myers-Briggs types of personalities, for example, boils down to 16 personality types. Itu pun tak meliputi semua sebenarnya. There are more than that. These are just like the major differentiation between the different types of people. Age difference is also an angle of diversity that we have to pay attention to, particularly now dengan lebih ramai warga emas dan sebagainya. And faith is another form of diversity. And ability or disability is also another form of diversity. Those with disability in one area may have special abilities in other areas. And it is up to us as leaders untuk mencungkil bakat-bakat yang terpendam ini. Okay, people with who are physically challenged, mentally challenged, or even socially challenged, like for example, those youths with autism. They may have specialties and talents that just waits for somebody to dig it out and make full use of it for the benefit of humanity and the community. So Margaret Mead, an American cultural anthropologist, said, if we are to achieve a richer culture, rich in contrasting values, we must recognize the whole gamut of human potentialities, and so weave a less arbitrary social fabric, one in which each diverse human gift will find a fitting place. So setiap manusia ada talent masing-masing, ada weakness and strength masing-masing, and the strength is there for leaders to pull it out and make use of it for the benefit of the organization, the community, the country. And in looking at diversity, we must also sometimes be a bit pragmatic. There may be filters or limits to how much diversity is acceptable to that population. There may be legal limits or filters and religious and cultural limits that defines what is acceptable diversity within a particular population. Right. Malaysia, truly Asia. That tagline is so familiar to all of us. This is the statistics of Malaysia. We can see how diverse Malaysia is. Even among the citizenry, although about 30 million of us are citizens, 3 million of our population are non-citizens. Okay, this is an angle of diversity that we have to look at. By gender, okay, about half are male, half are female. A little bit more actually males compared to females. And dari segi umur, ya, juga kita ada banyak kepelbagaian di sini. Okay, 23% are children, youths are about 70%. If you define youth up to 65 years old lah, ya. After 65, 6.7%, okay, of the population are warga emas yang atas pada 65 tahun. Dan di sini the ethnic groups also a diverse group, okay, although about 70% are Bumiputra, the rest 30% are non-Bumis, made up of Chinese, Indians and others. So kepelbagaian kita di Malaysia ni memanglah luas. Now we have to celebrate, kita kena meraihkan kepelbagaian ini, okay, for a good reason. Seperti mana Tan Sri Anwar kata tadi, one size doesn't fit all. It's very true, even biologically. I'm looking at this customized fetal growth chart as mentioned by Datuk Sri Maznah tadi tu, and we are working with a perinatal institute in UK on this, and we find that this biological diversity is something that we must respect in order to bring better perinatal care or pregnancy care to our population. Sebab kalau kita gunakan satu carta pembesaran yang sama untuk semua orang di Malaysia, chances is that we will not be able to capture those with abnormal growths, sama ada terlalu kecil atau terlalu besar. Okay, jika kita tidak mengambil kira the age of the mother, how many children she has already got, her height, her weight, and her ethnic group, and also the gender of the baby that she's carrying. Okay, so all this will color the kind of growth pattern that the baby that she's carrying should have. Jadi bila kita masukkan semua ni dalam this program, all these various parameters, the program will actually generate for us a graph that fits her to the point, personalized for that particular pregnancy, and that will reduce the risk of the baby dying in the womb because of unrecognized growth problems. Dan for us in the teaching institutions, whether we are teachers or lecturers, learning styles, the multiple intelligences of our students is something that we have to always bear in mind when we teach a group of students. Tidak semuanya sama, they all have different learning styles, and those have to be celebrated, have to be respected in order for us to be able to benefit them to the max. And I'm sure many of you have seen this, okay? A criticism of education systems where, the teacher tries to fit all the students into one basket, okay? As Albert Einstein says, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. And there are a lot of benefits of diversity to the organisation kalau kita meraihkan the diversity within the organisation. Research shows the striking importance of a country's diversity norms, such as gender role attitudes. I will elaborate on that later. The data suggests that for diversity to work, workers have to buy into the value of diversity, not just hear some rules about it. Rules are good to be in place, but not enough untuk ahli-ahli organisasi tersebut menghayati kepelbagaian, and through that, for everybody to benefit from that kepelbagaian. Diversity creates positive benefits only when people believe in its intrinsic value, not simply as an obligation. And there are three main reasons why opinions about the value of a diversity matter so much to the actual value that it brings. Yang pertamanya, a diverse workforce signals an attractive work environment for talents that may be looking for a place to contribute as a workforce, in the workforce. When you value diversity, you encourage diverse idea exchange. Therefore, a lot of innovation can actually take place. And a diverse workforce signals competent management for potential investors. They will see that as a good management where a diverse group of people can work peacefully with each other in harmony. And that all this, I've taken it from a Harvard Business Review. So, one of the professors in Harvard studied 1,069 leading firms across 35 countries and 24 industries. And it was found that gender diversity relates to more productive companies, but only in the context where gender diversity is viewed as normatively accepted in that community. And by normative acceptance, we mean a widespread cultural belief that gender diversity is important. And countries and industries that view gender diversity as important capture benefits from it, whereas those that don't do this do not benefit from it. And the positive effects of gender diversity is seen in societies with normative acceptance of working women, but not in societies with only regulatory support. And a comparison is made between, say, Western Europe and Japan. Okay, in Western Europe, gender diversity is celebrated. They can easily accept it in their community. There is normative acceptance. Therefore, companies which work in Western Europe benefit a lot from having women in their workforce. However, in Japan, for example, Japan was quoted as one classic example. It is a very patriarchal society. Japan is a very patriarchal society. Therefore, although Japan has got one of the best, is one of the best countries in the world in terms of giving privileges to working women, in terms of looking after their children, and also their maternity leave and so on. But Japan is not able to benefit from gender diversity as much as Western Europe. Okay, and this reminds me of what happens him in a dinner, when we had dinner with the faculty here. And when I was introduced to him, what he said was, this is the first time in his life that he has met a female dean from a medical faculty. So that shows us how little, women play roles in the workforce in Japan, especially in leadership roles. And now, in promoting diversity, increasing workplace diversity requires an overall shift in an organization's culture, and organizational leaders play a very critical role in establishing and promoting workplace culture. Employees look to leaders to set the context in which they will function within an organization. Now, establishing an environment that reflects the desired values of an organization requires more than just words from the leadership. Tak cukup dengan talk only. No action, talk only is not good enough. Okay, it requires action and the embodiment of these values. If employers espouse certain values but act in ways that directly contradict them, employees will see through the empty words and will look outside of the organization for a company that demonstrates the culture that they desire to participate in. And this is especially true in terms of workplace diversity, whether it's gender diversity, ethnic diversity, intelligence diversity, or whatever, or ability. And there is such a term called cultural competency, which is very important to inculcate in any organization in order to maintain good diversity, a healthy diversity. Now, cultural competency requires an individual to consider how culture can affect how another person perceives and understands the world around them. And there are various stages in developing cultural competency. Okay, first is awareness of diversity, and then understanding, the culture, the diverse culture that is within the organization, and then action which goes according to that. And one does not just decide that they are going to advocate the diversity and just start doing so. There's a lot of thought that has to go into that, a lot of training as I will allude to shortly. And people in the organization must first come to terms with particularly the leaders, they must first come to terms with their own stereotypes and biases, understand cultural values and norms of the groups they intend to interact with, and then act to promote diversity within their target area. And this is especially important for individuals in leadership roles. Now, I'm in the healthcare setup, so naturally I would allude to a healthcare setting. Okay, in a healthcare setting, cultural competency is best defined as the knowledge, skills, attitudes, and behaviors required of a practitioner to provide optimal healthcare services to persons from a wide range of cultural and ethnic backgrounds. And cultural competence requires that healthcare providers can use a completely different approach than they would for someone with a similar cultural background as they themselves have. And demonstrating cultural competence is critical in a healthcare setting because it can play a role in decreasing health inequity, which a lot of people talk about in various communities, including in our country. Now, as opposed to cultural competence, there is another aspect called cultural respect. That's also another ability or skill that a leader has to master. Cultural respect requires an individual to accept that there will always be skills to learn and mistakes made. In your effort to familiarize yourself with the diverse people in your organization, you have to come to terms with the fact that, yes, there is only that little that you know. There's a lot more to learn, and you're willing to learn as you go along. It involves a sense of humility because it is an acknowledgement that one cannot possibly know everything that there is to know about a person's cultural identity in every given situation. And diversity and cultures are dynamic, it changes, requiring constant education and adaptation of skills, including the skills and education of the leaders. And the promotion of cultural respect is recommended as opposed to cultural competence. So actually both are important. Promoting diversity, cultural competence, and cultural respect within an organization requires a strong commitment from the leadership, because there's lots of things that you need to do in order to immerse your organization in such in the diversity of the organization and the community that you serve. Now, in a healthcare organization, it is important for leaders to address the diverse needs of individuals in the communities being served. And this is often done through improving diversity within the organization. You have to be working with diverse people in order to be able to serve clients of diverse background. And having a workforce that mirrors the community being served can reduce health disparities among minority populations, as it can increase access to care by improving health-seeking behavior within the community that you serve. And providing cross-cultural and cultural sensitivity training to medical providers and staff can also improve community relationships and encourage community members to seek out care as needed. Thus, you may close the gap on healthcare inequity. Now, what are the barriers to embracing diversity? Now, one of the important barriers is one that has got to do with communication. Communication is so important, as alluded to by Tan Sri Aino tadi. One area in healthcare is the language barrier. That's as an example. Okay, and of course, language has a lot of aspects to it. It is not just the spoken language, but also body language, communication, And patients who do not speak a common language as their first language or at all require the services of an interpreter in a healthcare setting, and this can reduce the likelihood of misinterpretation of the information that you receive, and therefore reduce medical errors. It works towards patient safety because you reduce the risk of misinterpretation of the information that you get from your clients. And it also demonstrates a respect for cultures other than your own. And training the population or community to speak a common language is perhaps the ideal, but sometimes you may have to train more healthcare workers to be multilingual as an alternative measure to overcome this barrier. And being multilingual is something that I appreciate in my work with my patients. I know when I was a kid, I lived in a community which is Indian dominated, and therefore I had to learn Tamil. And with my grandparents, my maternal grandparents, I learned some Chinese, Hakka, Cantonese, and in my first year in university, I learned some Mandarin for the whole year. And when I communicate with my patients, I find that this is most useful. And these are some of the other barriers. The main barrier is actually a monocultural mindset. You may be starting off in an organization as a leader with a community in the organization which is of monocultural mindset. How do you get to the intercultural mindset? Okay, at first, your people may be denying almost like denying the existence of the diverse people whom they serve, and also perhaps some diversity in the organization itself. And subsequently, they move on towards perhaps some polarization when they are aware that there are different diverse groups of people around, and they start to judge the differences. But subsequently, hopefully, they will move on if you keep on, trying to train them to accept the diversity. There will be minimization of the differences in their minds, okay? And as a result of de-emphasizing the differences. And subsequently, hopefully, there will be acceptance of the diversity when there is deep comprehension of the difference between themselves and others. And finally, they will be able to adapt to the intercultural mindset when they can cross the bridge between all the differences that exist. Now, I was very inclined to put this slide in, women in leadership position and the impact of stereotyping. A lot of the things that we discussed just now, I think, shows how stereotyped people's minds are in terms of their outlook or their view of leadership, particularly where different genders are concerned. Women have identified stereotypes as an important barrier to the most senior positions in organizations. This may be one of the big barriers that sometimes we may not be totally conscious of. And scholars over the years have consistently echoed this view. Stereotyping may result in a self-fulfilling prophecy by the people who are stereotyped, we women. When a negative stereotype exists about a certain group like us, members of the group perform in a way that confirms the stereotype. And this phenomenon is called the stereotype threat. For women in management, this may result in the internalization of the idea that women are less capable of assuming leadership roles when it is not true. And stereotype threat has been proven to impact women negatively in academic fields and, importantly, in women's professional aspirations. And even TVET, for example, as opposed to the softer science and all that, I do not think it is healthy for us to stereotype and say that men are more suited to TVET, as opposed to women. My favorite subjects in school were maths and physics, and I'm sure there's lots of women out there who also have the same kind of tendency. And now, one important role of leaders in any organization is to train their workforce to embrace diversity. Leaders should incorporate diversity and inclusion parameters in the organizational quality assessment tools. And they should get feedback from their clients and community members out there regarding how the cultural needs of the community and the clients are or are not being met by the organization, and this will provide valuable insight regarding where diversity policies may be falling short or excelling. This evaluation will help avoid continued use of policies that fail to meet the diverse community needs, so that they can be redesigned or they can be terminated, to make way to allow resources to be directed towards programs that are working or work towards the development of new programs designed to more effectively address the diverse community needs. And this is one example of an interventional program that was conducted somewhere in US by a company, by an organization. First, they have an intercultural development plan within the organization. This is at the individual level. They review the individual profile results and implement customized intercultural development plan for that particular individual. And then they have intercultural development inventory feedback sessions, where the individual participate in feedback sessions with trained IDI qualified administrator coaches. So you have to have within your organization heroes for this, for the intercultural development inventory. And then the individual goes on to participate in a series of sessions as part of a shared learning community focused on intercultural competence, self-development, and efforts to meet the organization's diversity goals. Okay, so this is to develop communities of practice in terms of having diversity in your organization, celebrating or accepting the diversities. And then they also go on to participate in a conference focused on intercultural competence, cultural commonalities and differences, and the beginning stages of action planning. This is a statewide conference. So this is how training in order to accept diversity can take place. So I'm sure you will agree that being accepted is so much better than just being tolerated if you are considered as the diverse groups, or lain dari yang lain. Okay, and it all should start with diversity awareness. Okay, people should be aware of the diversity around them, and the first step after that is to tolerate the diversity, and then subsequently, hopefully, you go on to celebrate the diversity, and then leveraging the diversity for the benefit of the organization, and then finally, the whole organization embraces the diversity in order to fully benefit from it. So the journey is actually very long. It is not straightforward. There's a lot of corners everywhere, but I believe it can be done. So, in conclusion, I would say that diversity exists in various forms, in various aspects of human life, and in order to benefit from the presence of diversity in our midst, our organization must be able to embrace diversity. Acceptance of diversity by an organization requires good leadership skills in transforming the organizational culture and values towards this goal through training. And also, I thought I should bring this up as well. I think parental upbringing, family upbringing is also very important. Even in terms of gender diversity, accepting that it is not just males who can lead, but females can lead too. Even in the Quran, there is the Queen of Sheba, for example, is mentioned in the Quran as a leader of a country. Okay, and so that is accepted. We should not allow certain patriarchal figures in our community to bring us down and say that that is not acceptable. Okay, accepting diversity via regulations without change of mindset or developing cultural competence and cultural respect will not positively impact the organization. We have to have cultural competence and cultural respect. Conscious effort must be made by leaders of organizations in order to transform knowledge, skills, and attitude of their members to embrace diversity. And yes, although it may be said to be easier said than done, but I do believe that this is not impossible. So with that, I thank you for your attention.